We have today for you Dr. Purvesh Parekh, Group Oncology Director and Professor of Medical Oncology at Shalby Cancer and Research Institute, Mumbai. Dr. Anil Herur, Head of Surgical Oncology, Fortis Hospitals, Mumbai. Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya, Independent Medical Oncologist at Salt Lake Medical Center, Kolkata. Dr. Amit Verma, Senior Molecular Oncologist and Cancer Geneticist, Max Cancer Center, Delhi. And finally, Dr. Manjari Bakre, Cell Biologist, Founder and CEO, Oncostem Diagnostics, Bangalore. A very warm welcome to all the panelists and to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Over to Kashish.
Thank you, Sukriti. Now I'll just go through some basic etiquettes for the meeting. We've muted all the participants till the end of the speaker session. We request you not to mute your device yourself. If you have any questions, please make use of the chat feature and send the same to Rahul Panekar. Once the presentation is done, you will be able to ask your question. I will unmute you and you will also be visible on the screen when you talk. We request you also to be conscious of your attire, location, surroundings, and also your DP. Please also be aware if you've joined with video that anyone with you will also be visible to others. Now I request Dr. Purvesh Parekh for his speaker talk and to continue with his and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kavina Creations. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss Indian experience in molecular oncology of breast cancer. And can I have the next slide, please? So whenever we talk about management of any cancer, including breast cancer, we always refer to the NCCN guidelines as if that is the Holy Bible. And we also refer to this particular part of that, which is assessment of risk recurrence, which is going to be main part of the discussion today. And here the NCCN talks about adjuvant online, Oncotype DX, and MammaPrint. But is it that whatever NCCN says from the Caucasian population, is it also applicable to us or not? Let us look at that. Next, please. So in this slide, you can see that when we use such online tools for Asian patients, the performance is not good. There are 3 publications which I have highlighted here. The bottommost one clearly states that it is not applicable to Korean patients. The other one says that it is not applicable to young people from Asia. And the third one says that Asians are not having a good answer from this performance online tools because it always overestimates the outcome that is going to happen. So we have a real problem with these tools. Next slide. So are we causing harm to our patients by extrapolating results from Western population to other ethnics and populations? This has been clearly mentioned 2 years ago during SABCS when the TAILOR-X results were being discussed. Next slide. And look at the difference, particularly for women below the age of 50 years. The conclusion was that for women above the age of 50 years, using Oncotype DX on TAILOR-X, the RS score of 0 to 25 definitely indicated low risk. But this was not the case for patients who are less than 50 years, where there was a big chunk of people between the age between the RS score of 16 to 25, where it was unclear what was the likely interpretation of this tool. Next. And so also earlier this year in February 2020, it was shown that even in the MINDAC study, there was a major problem for patients below the age of 50 years. So we have a problem in younger patients. Next slide. Now this represents high risk, which is shown in red, versus low risk, which is shown in green. Right in the middle, where the high risk is the least, that is where we have the Western European data. And the 2 countries to the extreme right, which are inside the box, represent Japan and Korea, where you can see that the high risk patients are indeed much higher than the low risk patients. So clearly the biology of the disease is likely to be different based on various ethnic backgrounds. Next. And this is to show you where the mutations are. Here I've taken the example of breast cancer, and every black dot or line represents a location of a mutation on the gene. On the top is the Hispanics, in the bottom are the African Americans, and in the middle are the Asians. And the number of black dots and lines in the middle are far more than what you see in the American people. So clearly there is ethnic variations in the mutation, and obviously they will have different implications as far as the clinical outcome is concerned. Next. Now on the extreme right is United States and Sweden, where the peak age of breast cancer is 63 and 62 years. So if you have a problem for patients less than 50 years not being predicted well, that is not a problem for United States or Western Europe. But if you look at India, the peak age for breast cancer in our patients is 45 to 49 years. Exactly where the Oncotype DX and other tools are not effective in separating out the patients, and many of them would then be a fence sitter. So we won't really know how to deal with them. Next. So Asian Breast Cancer Cooperative Group had to bring out a consensus in 2019, and the categoric statement is that these data as per NCCN recommendations are not applicable to Asian women with breast cancer. Next. So what about ICMR? This is ICMR recommendation for breast cancer management, and in chapter 4 you can clearly see that they have specified about MammaPrint and Oncotype DX. And what is the statement? It says that the data from here does not include sufficient Indian patients, and therefore their application and interpretation is not recommended for Indian patients. And I think this is something that we need to really pay close attention to. Next slide. So let's come to CAN Assist. CAN Assist is a alternative which has a significant number of Indian patients. In fact, in the validation cohort, there were almost 300 patients. The other advantage of that is the patients are clearly divided into low risk and high risk. There is no intermediate group, and therefore there are no fence sitters. Next slide. So there was analytical validity, and then there was clinical validity in 1400 patients. I think this is something that is very important. And let's pay a little more attention to the clinical validity. Next slide, please. So across relevant clinical conditions, what was the clinical validation? Next slide. This is comparison of the survival among patients who were diagnosed as high risk versus low risk according to the CAN Assist breast interpretation. And you can clearly see that there is statistically significant difference between the survival in these patients based on the risk category doing away totally. There is no intermediate risk category at all here. Next slide. Now let us look at what happens to age above 50 years and age below 50 years. Here also there is consistent and similar differentiation between high risk and low risk patient using CAN Assist breast. And this is also statistically significant. Next, please. Here it is based on the lymph node status. On the left side is lymph node negative, in the middle is lymph node 1 N1 status, and the third one is node positive status. And in all these three, you can see that for patients receiving chemotherapy, these are all patients receiving chemotherapy, CAN Assist clearly distinguishes low and high risk. Next slide. And a similar outcome is there in patients receiving endocrine therapy as well. Next slide. So if you look at the Cox proportional hazard regression, then among the variants, you can see CAN Assist risk score is a highly statistically significant factor as far as what is the distinction between our patients of breast cancer is concerned. Next slide. Let us look at performance of CAN Assist breast versus Oncotype DX among the Taylor X patients. And here you can see that if Oncotype DX, the low risk patients would have been 17%, whereas CanAssist would say that they are 86%. Now this is a startling difference, and therefore you can see that 69% additional patients will be prevented from being overtreated if CanAssist breast was applicable to TAILORx. Next. Now head-to-head comparison with multi-gene tests. Next. And this is again between CanAssist breast and Oncotype DX. You can see that 38% are on the fence with Oncotype DX having an intermediate risk. And they are clearly divided into 16% with high risk and some part who goes to the low risk based on CanAssist. And this is a very consistent way in which these patients are divided, and further clinical decisions based on this is actually benefiting patients, both in terms of chemotherapy being given to high risk patients as well as saving the low risk patients from unnecessary chemotherapy. Next slide. This is concordance with Oncotype DX and CanAssist breast based on risk categories. And again, you can see that the risk stratification with CanAssist is better. Next. So also if you compare with MammaPrint, you can see that 73% overall concordance exists between the two for low versus high risk category. And there is a 85% concordance between MammaPrint and CanAssist breast for low risk category. So this is a good validation of what this CanAssist breast indicates about the risk category of patients. Next. Now, what about comparing CanAssist breast to Ki-67 and IHC4? Next, please. This is Ki-67 based risk stratification, comparing that to CanAssist breast, which is on the extreme right hand side. And the separation by Ki-67, whether it is less than 14% or it is less than 20%, is not as significant or not as dramatic as CanAssist breast. So clearly, CanAssist breast is much better at identifying low versus high risk patients as opposed to using Ki-67. Next, please. And here, this is Ki-67 risk group being categorized more accurately in these two, and you can clearly see that this is much better. Next slide. What about IHC4 risk based stratification? Here also you can see that the separation is maximum in the middle where CanAssist was used, as opposed to IHC4 risk stratification shown on the left, and also for the IHC4 intermediate zone risk stratification. So CanAssist clearly is the winner in all these options that we have today. Next. So how has this CanAssist test been actually impacting treatment in India? And on the left hand side, you can see the map of India with the dots representing where CanAssist has actually been used. More than 180 oncologists across 30 cities in India have used this test in more than 600 patients. And you can see that 70% of instances, the CanAssist test was actually able to identify low risk patients and therefore prevent them from getting unnecessary chemotherapy or potentially preventing them. Did it really actually make a difference in clinical practice? Next slide. Here you can see whether chemotherapy was given or not given after CanAssist identified the patient as low risk. And you can clearly see that only 14 out of 198 were actually given chemotherapy. That means the doctor did not believe what CanAssist said, whereas 184, that is 93% of decisions about chemotherapy were taken based on CanAssist. So this is actually proof of what has happened in the real world, and clearly 93% of patients were prevented from getting unnecessary chemotherapy because of CanAssist. Next slide. So now I've finished my brief presentation and we will move on to the panel discussion. We have eminent panelists from all across India. We have Amit Verma from Delhi, Anil Roor from Mumbai, Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya from Kolkata, and Dr. Manjari from Bengaluru. Can I have the next slide, please? So Amit, can I start with you? What do you think is the genetic heterogeneity between Indians, Asians, and the Caucasian population? And do we need to worry about that while we are interpreting molecular data?
So as you clearly showed on the one slide regarding the BRCA mutation, which is spread across the whole.
Can I request Amit to be unmuted, please? Amit
Yeah, can you hear
Verma,
me?
please.
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as you clearly showed the slide regarding the BRCA mutation spectrum compared to the other countries, Indian spectrum is quite different. And that is a germline representation what you did. It's pretty good and clear. We are totally different in terms of our ethnicity and the way we acquire mutations. And the same pattern has also been shown in the somatic analysis, though not that great. But yes, there are quite subtle differences what we see when we see the different populations. And especially the somatic analysis regarding the BRCA is also quite different in the Asian versus the West. So
Right.
all these things have implications in terms of the outcome. There are certain genes which carry good prognosis, and there are certain genes which carry bad prognosis. So any alterations affecting their functions can definitely impact the
Right.
outcomes. And having said that, Indian populations are relatively younger, at almost a decade younger. There has to be some, you can say, explanation. Definitely, it has to be genetic why the Indian population expressed that at a younger age. So definitely in terms of percentage or in terms of variation, I do not have the data, neither it has been published or compared that much. But seeing and extrapolating whatever we have in front of us, yes, we can say for sure that Indian populations has to be dealt in a different way. And we expect more aggressive cancers as compared to the West if we see the same population.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now, we did an online survey about molecular testing and its clinical implications in early breast cancer. And I'm going to share some of the slides. So this slide talks about the 79 responses. And you can see that the most of them, almost 90% were medical oncologists. And surgical oncologists were the second most. So my next question is to Anil. Anil, do you think that surgical oncologists are sufficiently aware about the need for molecular testing when they manage their patients of breast cancer and especially early breast cancer? So can we unmute Dr. Anil Hirur, please?
Dr. Anil, I have unmuted your mic. Please go ahead, sir.
So hi, Dr. Purvish Parikh, and thank you, OncoStem and Kashish, for having this. Basically, I think surgeons are a little more evolved now, sir. I mean, they do have to face these questions from their patients. So I think a lot of them are really aware. The reason is that a lot of times, whenever a test, a treatment is prescribed by the medical oncologist, patients do come up to the surgeon. They do ask questions regarding the entire process. And that is why I think most surgeons that I know now are quite aware of the option. They might not get into the germline mutations and exactly the kind of pathways that the treatment entails, but definitely they do have, most of them do have an awareness about what about the need and about the consequences of the test and the treatment as well.
Excellent. So Kashish, can you unmute Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya now? So the majority of the responders are medical oncologists, and over the last 4 years, we've had 4 annual conferences of Molecular Oncology Society. How well evolved are the medical oncologists today in their understanding of molecular oncology in breast cancer? Dr. G.S., please.
Dr. Parikh, thanks for having me here. And Kashish, and Kavina organizing this. I think the medical oncology has evolved in quite a majority way, I would say, and it's still evolving. We are integrating the molecular knowledge which is coming into us, and this is showing up basically in certain areas like in breast cancer, lung cancer, predominantly, or even in other areas where we are getting into the system of using theranostics, and we are also getting into the use of precision medicine in patient. But there is still a lot of way to go because there are hurdles that we need to come up. If you would permit me, Purvesh, the question that you had asked Amit, I'm going to give you some data, basically that is not on BRCA, but on genomic study of breast cancers, and that's a paper first published in 2006 by Steva Godson. This paper was entitled as Gene Expression Profiling of Breast Cancer in Ethnic Population and Aid to Gene Discovery and Benefit to All. This was in Science, basically. And that showed that breast cancer ethnically was different from different groups. And they had actually put it down as Caucasians. And even in the Caucasians, they divided them. Asians were divided. We had the Hispanics. So they did show that there is a difference in the type of breast cancer that's coming up with the genomic. This is the same group actually, which was Chuck Paru's group, which when did the intrinsic classifier. So actually we have known that breast cancer genomically, not just hereditary wise, but as far as concerned, we actually are different. And that is why one has to think carefully when we have these gene array studies. And sorry, it was not my question, but I took it. And we have evolved in a big way, I would say.
Right. So there's one question from Dr. Amish Vora, and I will request the organizers to unmute Amish so that he can ask his question. It is related to whether Indians are near Asians or Caucasians, or where is it as far as the genomics is concerned. So can we unmute Amish, please?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
So 2 questions which I have put forth. One is to you and to Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya, both. One, we keep on saying different, but are we near to Caucasians or are we near to Asians? Because majority of the Asians, the Korean studies you have shown, but not Indian. North Indians genetically are different from South Indians, and there are studies after studies done where we are genetically nowhere similar to so-called Asians if you include Koreans, Chinese and Hong Kong people into Asia. And my second question is, yes, genomically there are different studies, but if we take care of, if we look at Rajiv Gandhi recent publication where they have shown a very large data, I forget the number of breast cancer patients, but they have shown that HER2 positive, TNBC are exactly behaving similar way, clinical behavior I'm talking, sir, clinical behavior and also outcome behavior, same as reported from the Western literature. Why do we need to dig into further to sub-classify why are we different? That is my question.
So I will start answering first and then GS can add. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that we are different and we are closer to Asians than Caucasians, and the outcome is different. And all you have to do is to look at lung cancer. If you look at lung cancer, the incidence of EGFR mutation in Caucasian population is 5%. Ours is 32% and the Japanese and Koreans is 46%. So we are definitely closer. Whether the clinical outcome or the stage is different has nothing to do with the molecular this thing. The stage is different, later stage in presentation, because our patients come late. And if we are not going to change the treatment, how can we expect the outcome to be different? So if I have a patient of lung cancer and I don't do molecular testing and I give all the patients to chemotherapy, irrespective of what the double agent chemotherapy I give, the outcome is the same. But that same patient, if I decide to distinguish between EGFR positive and negative, the outcome is dramatically different. And today, instead of having a 8-month survival of metastatic lung cancer, we are talking about 2, 3, and 5 years survival. So just because we are not applying this knowledge to breast cancer doesn't mean that breast cancer is not different. So I will stop here and I will ask Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya and then Dr. Amit Verma to add to the answer to your queries. Dr. G.S., please, can you unmute him, please?
Thanks, Purvesh. Thanks for the question. Amish, let me try and point it out to you. Your part of your question is one. In the year 1987, I had a paper which was in Blood with Dr. G.R. Sargent, which was looking at thalassemia incidence and types in India. We had a novel alpha thalassemia, which was a 3.7 kilobase deletion alpha thalassemia. This gene actually matches with Saudi Arabian area alpha thalassemia and from certain areas of East Europe. We are genomically very close to this group, even when the gene is studied higher. This is data that's coming out of the National Institute of Molecular Biology from Hyderabad. I have that paper, that is one. So we are closer to the Eastern Europe group, which has not yet been subtyped, or because we haven't been doing that. Second is, Amit, you're absolutely right. We have two different groups. We have a North Indian, we have a South Indian group. But let me also point out to you, we also have a group which has got a lot of Mongoloid isms. Second part is, Amit, genomics will express the phenotype, but the phenotype is determined by other things also. So there is no doubt the Rajiv Gandhi data says that if you give HER2, that does better. We have no evidence to tell you right now that HER2 in India doesn't work as well as HER2 or works less that of the US. But we know something for sure. We are genomically different. We have different genomic outliers. We even behave different. For example, I'll give an idea of another disorder in the hematological field. Sickle cell thalassemia in India is a much milder disease compared to the Jamaican disease, or compared to the disease that you would see in South Africa. The reason happens to be there are genetic other interactions which are taking place. I think Amit also wants to add something to this. We are different, and keep that in mind. And I will tell you one thing. The TCGA data shows you that there is at least 18 major genotypic differences in the breast cancer thing. I had a look at it today morning, which is there. And I had Sunil Badwe confirm this also, that this actually is true, that we have 18 major gene differences which are there in the TCGA.
Right. Can we unmute Amit Verma for his comments, please?
Dr. Amish, your point is well taken. I wanted to go a little beyond the way we see breast cancer. We should not conclude what we see in a HER2 positive disease and conclude the same thing for the hormone positive breast cancer. If you compare triple negative, there is ample of data which talks about the subtyping of triple negative. The percentage vary from from different countries to different countries. For example, if you do an intrinsic subtyping in an African population, I am just quoting a paper here, which talks about that the basal-like form is almost like 34% in the African population as compared to the American population. So it reflects that there is a difference in terms of the gene expressions, and definitely the outcomes are different. But rightly said by Dr. Purvesh Parikh, as we are not treating them differently, the outcome remains the same. If we compare the hormone positive breast cancers, you may find that not only there are subtle differences in terms of the secondary mutations, but mainly there are some various polymorphism which are ethnically based, which can depict, or you can say predict, the responses to your hormonal treatment. To just enumerate an important gene in pharmacogenomics, that is CYP2D6, where the percentage of polymorphism is quite different in the US versus India. So the chances of resistance will be definitely different, and the outcome will be different. So the point here is not only the tumor genetics, but the host genetics also play an important role in the outcome and the presentation of the disease. And that both has to be taken into account before we take you can say understanding of the whole subject.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think Hemant has raised his hand. Can we unmute Dr. Hemant Malhotra, please?
Hi everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, my video is off because I'm on the treadmill, so please pardon me for that.
Good, keeping fit.
Yeah. So, I have, my question is to Dr. Bhattacharya and to Dr. Manjari. For the the cutoff in our test is 15.5. For a patient who has a score of 5 or a patient who has a score of 85, it's pretty easy to believe that this is low risk and this is high risk. For a patient who has a number of 14, you call that as low risk, and for a patient who has a number of 17, you call that as high risk. I'm a little uncomfortable for this category. So can you convince me that the fence sitters are also as properly categorized as the outliers?
So can we unmute Manjari to answer this, please?
Dr. Manjari, I've unmuted your mic.
Yeah. So, hello everybody. Thanks, Dr. Malhotra, for the question. I don't have the exact statistics on the fence sitters, but what I can tell you for sure is we had done this analysis for one of the regulatory submission, and we had noticed that the risk category, the variation in the, so we took a intermediate kind of a zone between around 15.5 and tried to assess how does the patient profile look, and we found consistently the patients who were stratified as low risk remain low risk. We looked at multiple patients in that category. So I mean, for a test which gives you a binary response, there will always be this kind of a question. And now, in fact, even Genomic Health has made it almost a binary decision. So this question always remains, but we also give an absolute risk of recurrence value along with the risk score, and that can be a guiding percentage risk of recurrence can be a guiding part for the treatment planning as well.
So that is right, Manjari. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like to the experts again, and Dr. Manjari particularly, am I right in thinking that for a patient who has a score of 14, I may think of giving chemo, and for a patient who has a score of 17, I may think of not giving chemo, vis-a-vis a patient who has a score of 5 and a score of 85? Considering other clinical factors in mind.
So maybe I should start answering the question. Please interpret this can-assist breast in the context of other factors for the patient.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is very, very important. I think we should not forget that our clinical
Yes.
decision-making process is not dependent on a single test.
Yes.
It also should depend on what is the patient's expectation. We sometimes forget to take the patient's opinion in mind. If the patient says that I want the best chance of treatment and outcome irrespective of toxicity, then for a patient of 14, I might still go ahead with chemotherapy. At the same time, that if the patient says, if there is any chance of me not taking chemotherapy, I want to take it. So we must take into consideration patient opinion or patient expectations from the outcome. And ultimately, Hemant, you and everybody else will have to decide based on the whole factors, including comorbidities and whatever possible toxicities or drug interaction that you want to avoid. So if you decide to, follow what you thought that for 14, I want to give chemotherapy and 17, I don't want to give chemotherapy, nobody can say you are wrong.
Right.
Because you have put together everything for the patient. And I think that is really important.
Correct. Absolutely agree. Very, very well said.
Yes.
So Bhavesh has a question. Can we now unmute Dr. Bhavesh Parekh, please?
Dr. Anil has a comment.
Okay. Sorry.
So,
my apologies.
So Dr. Purvish, I would really echo that. The normal question that patients ask in this kind of scenario is that whether or not, what is the chance of recurrence, whether I will, by chemo, am I going to have a lesser chance of recurrence? That is the question that they ask whenever you come into these borderline zones. And I think most oncologists would like to be play safe and say that chemo should be given. Most of the times it ends up in the clinical scenario, it ends up in chemo being given. Because nobody can, sort of swear and say that it will be safe not to take chemo.
Correct. And that is how in the real world experience, 14 patients got the chemo, even though their can-assist breast showed a low score. But at least for the 93%, the majority, we are able to save them from unnecessary chemo. Can we now go to Dr. Bhavesh, please?
Bhavesh sir, I have unmuted your mic. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so again, my question is to Dr. Amit and Dr. Purvis also. Sir, in your presentation, you had clearly told that CAN assist is in every aspect, it is very helpful. So generally we had as a clinician, we had a problem is for the young patient as well as node negative, whether to give chemo or not, because we feel that young patient still required chemotherapy rather than old age people, where we can definitely avoid some chemotherapy if looking the other clinical factors also. So especially young patient and not negative, if we do CAN assist, and if there is a low risk, definitely can we avoid, as again recently you also pointed out that you have to consider other point also and the patient characteristic also. But with this all point, should a clinician in a young and not negative will be more rely on CAN assist low score?
So I would definitely rely on CAN assist score, whether it is low or high, and incorporate that in the decision making process. Definitely yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Right. So now there was one more question from Geeta. Can we unmute Geeta, please? Geeta is asking me actually why I had shown a slide where there was one graph with N1 and the another graph with node. So Geeta, for that the answer is that N1 represents only N1 and the rest other graph was for all node positives. So that included the subset of N1 plus the other nodes. And the second question that, okay, go ahead, please ask your question. Now that you are unmuted.
It is okay to compare, say oncotype DS. If you look at most of these assays, they are all gene-based assays, and we are talking genes, But we must realize that the CAN assist is actually an IHC-based test. It is not a gene-based test, unlike oncotype DX or MammaPrint, or for that matter, EndoPredict, or whatever else is there. And the other thing, like I said, the N1, essentially you mean that it is 1 to 3 nodes, and then beyond that, all of that is node positive. I didn't get, I didn't understand why we need that kind of, subgroup classification. Do you think there is anybody at all, any medical oncologist at all, who would not give chemotherapy for somebody who is 4 nodes plus? I doubt very much.
So how to interpret the test is up to you. But it shows that there is a consistent survival difference, which is statistically significant, irrespective of which node you're saying. So what we are saying is, irrespective of nodal status, CAN assist breast gives some prediction of what is the outcome. Whether for
what is the number? How many numbers have you tested of patients who are hugely node positive and have shown to be and how have you interpreted it? What has been the follow up on it? Because you're saying that it is, you're getting a lot of low risks in them, and have those patients not had chemotherapy? You need follow up on that, because just having data on, on hugely node positive as, as having a low score, but eventually how do they behave when you do not, and how many patients actually did not receive any chemotherapy? That is what is the crux of the matter.
So I will answer one, and Manjari, you can take the other part. The first part is, how have they behaved? The behavior is very evident on the survival graph that I shown, and there is a significant difference of between 60% for high risk versus 83% for low risk in the survival. So there is no doubt about the survival outcome. Now Manjari
how
can
many
answer.
Patients? How many patients?
Yeah. So Manjari can answer you. If you give her time, she will answer. No?
Yeah.
So Manjari, can we unmute her and she can answer that question?
Yeah, so as the graph shown by Dr. Purvish, so in the node N1 cohort, we had totally about 450 patients, and Dr. Geeta, each patient was followed up for minimum of 5 years. And some of them we have up to 7 years follow-up as well. So all of the patients in the N1 cohort were followed up, all 450 patients were followed up for that much time. And we know the outcomes of all of these patients for sure.
And they got only hormonal treatment?
No, some of them have been treated. So N1 cohort is a mixed cohort of chemoendocrine.
Then you cannot say that it is because of, whether it is low risk or high risk, you're treating them irrespective with chemotherapy, then how do you say that it is your, your CAN-ASSIST score assisted in telling us what the survival curves were?
No, so CAN-ASSIST is only segregating the patients into low and high risk. In retrospective manner, there were very few cases which were N1 and were not given chemotherapy. As you can imagine, there were no tests and not used in India at that time. So having said that, out of 450 patients, I can be sure there are at least 10 patients who were not given, 10% patients who were not given chemotherapy.
That's very small. So if you say 450, of which 10% did not get chemotherapy, that's a huge confounding factor.
This is the N1 cohort, Dr. Geeta. There are no patients who are available.
Positive? What about the node positive?
So the node
How
positive.
many patients?
The node, but if you want to look at completely non-chemotherapy treated patients, I would say why don't you look at the node negative cohort, which is completely chemotherapy naive. That is 355 patients. None of them got chemotherapy. And you can see CAN-ASSIST risk is able to segregate them into low and high risk very clearly in a very statistically significant manner.
So even that is a small number.
Geeta, whatever you have said is a valid point, and you can interpret the results the way you want. If you don't want to not give chemotherapy to a low risk patient with node positive, that's fine. You are not wrong. But the idea is that the results of the test give you an additional factor that you have to take into consideration while taking the decision. Can we now go to Dr. Shefali Sardana? She wants to ask a question about high-risk patient, just like Geeta was asking. So,
Yeah.
Shefali,
Good,
please.
yeah, good evening, sir. So, nice presentation. I have two questions. That is the CAN-ASSIST a predictive test also, and it caters to high-risk factors like family history or bilaterality, which is a drawback of other recurrence scores like oncotype, etc. available. And the second question is, can we rely on CAN-ASSIST solely to decide for OFS decision also? Because according to CAN-ASSIST, there was very low percentage of population which was sufficing in high risk. So OFS is a major decision to be made in those patients. And according to the categorization, recurrence score is one of the important factor apart for age and other risks to decide for OFS.
So I will ask Amit Verma and Manjari to respond. The first part of the question was if the patient has a family history of breast cancer or if the patient has bilateral breast cancer, would you rely on CAN-ASSIST breast? Amit, can you take the first part, please?
Dr. Shefali, a very good question. So regarding the bilateral categories in hereditary cancers.
Sir, can we request you to take the mic closer?
Yeah, for the bilateral cancers or the hereditary cancers, probably we are dealing with, they behave totally different. They have a different outcomes. What we know, their biology works in a very different fashion, especially because of their underlying genes which are altered in these cases, which dictate so many things. Even if they are hormone positive, they may not behave exactly like hormone positive most of the time. Having said that, patients with bilateral cancers, if we are doing a bilateral oncotype DX or a bilateral CAN-ASSIST, then comparing each score and deciding on that, probably you may get some answers. But I doubt the validation of this particular test has not been done in this particular subset. So it is very hard to comment how you can extrapolate that information, but I would refrain myself to extrapolate a bilateral cancer for any testing, whether it is oncotype, MammaPrint, or CAN-ASSIST. I would just go with my own, you can say, clinical parameters alone to take a call.
Right.
Thank you. And now, Manjari, can you answer the question about OFS decision and high-risk patients?
Sure. Can you please repeat the question? I didn't really get it.
Yeah. So my question is, because CAN-ASSIST categorized only a small percentage of patient into the high risk category, and the high risk patients tend to eventually get the chemo and ovarian function suppression in a premenopausal patient. So can we rely wholesale on CAN-ASSIST if the patient is, say, suppose 40 years old and falls in the CAN-ASSIST low risk category? So can we, totally give away the idea of OFS in such a patient because she'll not be a candidate for chemotherapy according to CAN-ASSIST?
Right. So oral
Gain
endocrine
function
suppression.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have had such cases in which a patient was around 40 years old, and she was low risk by Canas's breast. And this is really about prospective. I mean, we have them in the retrospective validation as well as in the prospective 600 tests that we have sold. We have had patients who were around 40 and were called low risk by Canas's breast, and the clinician actually did not give chemotherapy, and they are doing fine. It's been 3.5 years for many of them.
So did they receive OFS plus endocrine, I mean tamoxifen plus Zoladex, or only tamoxifen for that purpose? Do we have that data available, or we don't have?
I don't know about Zoladex, but they definitely received endocrine therapy. Tamoxifen,
Right.
yes.
Right.
But I can get back to you by looking at and finding out from the patient information. Yes.
Right.
So Amish wanted to ask a question about the 1400 patients. Can we have Amish unmuted, please?
Amish sir, please go ahead.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, sir, there are a lot of questions regarding patient details. So, actually, I was thinking that if we have one more presentation of the details like inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, stage-wise distribution, sex distribution, median follow-up, the way we present any phase 3 data, I think it will solve a lot of queries. My also one of the suggestion to Geeta and many of others are, we have a lot of questions because this is an Indian data. And Oncotype DX giving Taylor X with so many caveats, we tend to accept it in our day-to-day practice because probably the NCCN approves it. I think we should give CanAssist a chance in our clinical practice and see how it works. Since I'm unmuted, sir, my question to anyone or who are involved in this study, TMH was one of the centers who had done this study. What is in their day-to-day practice, because of the cost issue? I have worked in TMH, so I know the cost is a major issue. Outside a setting of clinical trial, how serious are they about CanAssist testing on a day-to-day routine clinical basis?
So if there is anybody in the audience right now who is from Tata Hospital, maybe they can answer. In the meantime, can I ask Manjari, you have some slides that show the updated data on your patients. Do you think you can show that just now and talk about that?
This is about just the pure Indian data. So is that what is required to be shown?
Whatever you like.
Sorry? Okay.
Yes,
Somebody
go ahead.
Okay. I mean, all that we have shown so far is the total 1400 patient data. And that is a mixture of Indian and Caucasian data. So we also looked at just pure Indian data out of this to see how does the data look. So if you can see the first slide. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the entire Indian data. No, first slide. Yeah. First slide. This is pure Indian data with total cohort of 872, and CanAssist is able to segregate the patients into low and high risk category really well. And the Kaplan-Meier survival curve on the right hand side is for the Indian patients who were treated with only endocrine therapy, and even there the low and high risk stratification was very clear. So this is, I mean, mainly what we wanted to highlight by showing this is pure Indian data as compared to the previous slides in which we have combined data from India and from Caucasians.
So Manjari, the question was also about inclusion criteria, etc. So
Sure.
Can you tell us, in international journals,
right,
how many publications do you have about CanAssist breast?
Yes. So we have 4 publications in the international journals, and actually the cancer medicine paper, which talks about the clinical validation of this of CanAssist breast, has actually given the entire table detailing out the age, the node status, and the tumor size, and the endocrine therapy, chemotherapy, percentage of patients. All of that is given in the cancer medicine paper. So we would be happy to send it to you also, Dr. if you haven't read this, or if you haven't come across it, Dr. Amish, we can send you a soft copy of it also. And we have another publication in about analytical validation of this test in BMC Cancer. And the development of this test was published in Biomarker Insights. And we have the IJSO paper, which talks about the prospective use of this test and how it has helped patients in 93% patients in not receiving chemotherapy based on risk stratification of these patients as low or high risk based on CANASYS based in a prospective manner.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Can we ask now Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya for his opinion about the clinical application of CANASYS breast in Indian patients? Can we unmute Dr. G.S. please?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Purvesh, I'll start off with what Hemant had asked me to answer. I will just tell Hemant something that Hemant, unlike the scores that you see in the recurrence score of 21, which is a continuous distribution, this is a binary distribution. So there is a cutoff value. In a binary mathematical analysis, it's always a single cutoff value. That's the first point. Second point is, I think Geeta brought up the statement of comparing an IHC best test with that of comparing with the genomic based test. I'm going to tell Geeta that Geeta, there's been a brilliant paper in the American Journal of Pathology, which is accepted, and if people would check, they would know something called Maggie score. This Maggie score compares equivalently well with that of Oncotype DX, and that's the basis where this Maggie scoring system actually comes into this algorithm of CANASYS. That's the second part. Third part is this, unlike the the Oncotype actually looks into basically the tumor size. It looks into the tumor grade, takes the tumor specificities into account, which actually TAILORx doesn't. As a matter of fact, Oncotype DX does not take it into, and I would actually ask everyone to go into a later article by Dr. Saparno, which has been there when he's brought the clinical factors, incorporating it with the risk factors, and they suddenly would realize that that data is actually trying to show something similar when CANASYS was applied to the Oncotype DX. Coming to its clinical utility. The clinical utility of anything actually is based upon is that efficacy, efficiency, and effectivity. And please remember that all these three words are not similar. They are not same either. They are different. And we have to keep in mind finally the effectivity and the same efficiency. With the same effectivity, I would prefer the test that will give me all three of them. CANASYS actually complies all three of them. And to take you back and ask you all a question that I know people are going to say, why discuss cost in this meeting? The question is, you have to discuss cost, because at the end, if it's patient's choice, pharmacoeconomics is an important test. If you do not leave out the low risk coming from the combined analysis of clinical and the recurrence score, then Oncotype DX is not a cost-effective test. Even for you, I think as a clinical utility, it's a step forward. Second is, let me point out to everyone out here that in Oncotype DX, the median size of the tumor was 1.8. The average Indian tumor is more than 2.5 centimeters. So where is the application of Oncotype DX? Second is, majority of patients in Oncotype DX in the study of what we saw basically was your treatment. We could see that the grade of the tumor was basically grade 1, mainly. Most of our tumors, if you look at our statistical data, is more of grade 2 and 3. Coming back to the numbers of number of people who are positivity. We have conjunctions. We are still waiting for responder study to come out. Other thing that I will actually like to inform everyone out here, please remember in mind that this Oncotype DX is based on a genomic analysis of not only ERPR, but is based on basically what is known as the proliferation. There are a couple of genes there which are actually, in my opinion, outlier genes, which anybody with genomics should understand. There's a HER2 gene being looked into that particular group of 21 genes. There's a GATA gene being looked into out there, which is a part of it. The test that is based of the CanAssist is based on what is called basically a system, which is actually looking at what is called, I would say, the Winberg's entire paper of the hallmarks of malignancy, of which EMT was one. And if one goes through this data carefully, looks at all the paper, which Manjari just talked of it, it'll be clear what they're looking at and what we're looking at. In fact, CanAssist may be that in future might be applicable to all sorts of tumors because of the nature of the genes, I mean, rather the markers that they're looking at.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, so one of the questions that we had asked was, what is the beneficial effect in a patient who is T1N0, hormone receptor positive and HER2 negative? So Anil, I'm going to ask you the question. In your practice, when you are faced with such a patient, how will you decide which minority of these patients actually need further chemotherapy and should be referred to a medical oncologist? Can we unmute Anil Herur, please?
Anil sir, can you unmute your mic? Huh? Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, sir. Most of these, it depends on a lot of clinical factors. If this is a patient who is an elderly patient, then probably we would start off with hormone positive straight away. But if she's a younger patient, has some family history, then definitely I would probably be more inclined to suggest chemotherapy to her.
All right. And in such a patient, do you think that using a biomarker-based prognostic test actually helps you?
Yes, I do think that it helps. The biomarker test definitely helps. It sort of validates your clinical decision, makes explaining the decision to the patient much more easier from a clinical standpoint.
All right. Patient might also be going to Amit Verma for a second opinion after you and I have talked to them. So Amit, do you get such second opinion requests? Doctor has operated, he has said that you have very little risk of getting recurrence. We have done CanAssist breast and therefore we are happy that chemotherapy is not required. But are you really sure that this is going to be useful? So Amit, what has been your experience in such instances?
So my experience is in terms of second opinion comes like what type of test we should go, because there are so many options. That is the first question normally patient asks. And then sometimes the patient comes with the report, what to do with this report actually. So we have to talk about all the limitations of the particular test as well. So these are two situations what I encountered. And patients sometimes also get reports from the two different testing and the discrepancy is there. So these are the three different scenarios what not normally I encounter in my second opinion related to the prognostic assays.
All right. Excellent. So Amish Vora has a question. We'll unmute him and his question is going to be projected at Manjari. So Manjari, you should be ready to answer. Amish, go ahead.
Yeah. So as Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya gave in his comment, I just wanted to ask Dr. Anil Herur also and Dr. Manjari also, is there a concordance between the grade Ki67 and these risk stratification scores, especially CanAssist has any data? That will be to Dr. Manjari. And Dr. Anil, T1N0 means less than 2 centimeter ERPR, strongly positive, elderly gentleman. But if Ki67 is 20%, would you send to any medical oncologist thinking that, we or both are evolving?
Yeah, hi Amish. No, I would still, if it is an elderly person and even if the Ki67 has not been shown to be a very, very good marker, I would still put the person on put the person on hormonal therapy, and if she is not willing for doing a biomarker test. Otherwise, definitely a biomarker test would help.
So high Ki67 and grade 3, both if they are matching in histopath report, but the tumor size is less than 2 centimeter, you would still not consider for chemotherapy, right?
In an elderly
Grade 3
person.
ERPR positive, an elderly person, yes. Elderly is above 65, above 70, whatever you
Above
take.
70, yeah.
Okay. Dr. Manjari, in terms of can assist and the concordance, what I asked the question, if you can highlight.
Yeah, so by concordance, you mean comparison of can assist breast with Ki67 based stratification for risk of, for high risk versus low risk. And then followed, right? So as Dr. actually Purvi showed, so we have compared our data with can assist breast based risk stratification on the same cohort, which was also stratified based on Ki67. And you know, there are different people, different cutoffs by being used by different labs. So some of them use 14% as cutoff. So any patient with Ki67 14% or lower, they are considered as low risk, and higher than 14% is considered as high risk. So, and some of them use 20% as cutoff. So we compared both these Ki67 based stratifications with can assist breast, and we have noticed that Ki67 based stratification, whether irrespective of the cutoff used, is actually quite inefficient in stratifying patients into low versus high risk. The difference between the two categories was very little, about 3 to 4% maximum, and it was not statistically significant either cutoff used. Whereas the same cohort, can assist breast was able to segregate in a very statistically significant manner with a big difference of about 13% between the low and high risk categories. Next, we also looked at whether the Ki67 low patients, having less than 14% Ki67, or whether patients having higher than 14%, whether can assist breast is able to segregate them further into low and high risk categories. Because Ki67 as such is a troublesome marker with the kind of antibodies used, the way it is scored on hotspots versus the entire slide, etc. There are many issues of scoring it as well, and lab to lab consistency in Ki67 can be very, very varying. So when we did this restratification of Ki67 subgroups, so we found that can assist was able to find high risk patients in Ki67 low risk category as well. That is, all the patients stratified as low risk by Ki67, CAB was able to find patients who were at high risk for recurrence, and many of them actually recurred as well. And on the contrary, the patients who were stratified as high risk based on Ki67, can assist was able to find many patients who were at low risk and had an excellent survival of 96%. So this once again shows you that there are Ki67 is not a foolproof biomarker to be used for stratification, and in comparison to that, can assist based certainly is a better prognosticator of the disease.
Excellent. Thank you, Manjari. My next question is going to be to Dr. Amit Verma. You can see on the slide which validated biomarker based test is most commonly used in India for early patients of breast cancer. And you can see that more than half of them are using Oncotype DX, and the second most common is can assist breast. And then a small minority are using the other three. So Amit, what has been your experience in these 5 tests?
So Oncotype DX is definitely the first to on the preference list of the physician, and can assist is picking up as just rightly showed in the graph. But the other tests like MammaPrint, ProSigna, and EndoPredict, their availability, logistic, and practical issues are the limiting factor. That is why it is not being used that often. But Oncotype DX is comparatively used preferably more as compared to the other tests. My practice also is almost the same actually.
So excellent. I think Manjari, that is good news for OncoStem, that availability and accessibility to Oncotype DX is a good thing. Dr. Hemant Malhotra has raised his hand. Can we unmute him so that he can ask his question, please?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So this is more of a comment than a question. I
Yes.
think this is a made in India test. We are very proud of this. We would like to use it more and more. And for me, the major usage of this test or any other test for the matter, Oncotype DX or Memprint, is for the clinical patient in which you yourself are confused whether chemo will benefit or not. And particularly in that large chunk of patients in which you get an expensive test and it throws the patient into the intermediate category, and then you're back to square one. So at least you have a test now which will unequivocally tell you and also the patient and the patient's attendant if there are no clinical factors which are guiding you with regards to chemo or no chemo. You have a test which really helps you. So I've got it done in 4 or 5 patients, and I have followed the recommendations as per the score which was shown in the test, and I find it very useful for a relatively small subset of patients. Over.
Right. Perfect. Now let's say that Hemant has done this test and the result has come. And his question was that sometimes it is not possible to do what the test is saying regarding avoiding chemotherapy or not avoiding chemotherapy. And Manjari's data had shown that 93% concordance exists in what the test shows and what actually happens. So GS, what happens in your practice? Are you able to follow what the test is predicting, or there are some other issues that compound the decision-making process? Can we unmute Dr. GS Bhattacharya for this, please?
I'm unable to find Dr. GS.
Okay, so then we can ask Anil to answer that question, and then we'll see what else happens. So Anil, are you able to follow what the test shows in most of your patients, or there is some other compounding factor?
No, I think with the experience that we have had with CanAssist, I think most of the times we have followed the decision making, except in those cases where clinically the patient looks a little high risk, as Dr. Hemant Malhotra had alluded to. Those are the cases where I would still prefer that the patient takes chemotherapy. Young patient, family,
Right.
family history. These are the patients where you are a little on the back foot.
Right. Now, my next question is going to be to Dr. Amit Verma, and this is about compliance and regulations. Amit, you have access to a lot of tests and a lot of possibilities. Now, the ICMR document says that clinicians and oncologists in India should rely on tests which have some Indian data on the basis of which we have to decide. And so question to you is, do you think that DCGI as a drug regulator or ICMR should recommend only those tests where sufficient Indian patients have been used to validate the results of the study? So over to Amit, please.
My answer is a strong yes, as we have learned very crudely that we are underrepresented most of the tests across various publications which we normally quote and refer to, and the guidelines we follow. And we understand, we discuss about the genetic and ethnic variations. Definitely, we should ask the DCGI or ICMR to make sure whenever a test is approved in India to be pack test, Indian cohort, a significant percentage of Indian cohort should be tested, and then it should be allowed to be practiced or marketed in India. That is for the international, you can say, testing. And for the Indian indigenously developed assays, I think we should be more liberal to use them, so that more and more, you can say, experiences, affordability can be there, and more people can benefit out of the whole testing, you can say, opportunities actually.
Right. Thanks. My next question is going to be to Manjari based on the slide that is being shown. When we did the survey, most of the people, almost 3/4 of the oncologists said that the other comparator tests, Oncotype DX, Mammaprint, etc., are applicable to post-menopausal patients. So my question is it related to age that it is post-menopausal because they are elderly, or menopausal status and age are two independent factors? So can we unmute Manjari, please?
So you are asking whether I think menopausal age and menopausal state and age, whether they
Yes.
are related.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, because I think the disease biology changes. How aggressive is the disease changes when the patient becomes postmenopausal versus patient is young and is premenopausal. So I think that those are very interlinked in my opinion, and that's why it is important to validate the test in the, not only validate but even develop it on the population you are going to use it. But certainly if you can't develop it, you need to validate it on that set of patients in which it is used. For example, I think the IHC4 is primarily and only validated in postmenopausal patients. So that is an important aspect to keep in mind, because as Dr. Cliff Hudis had written in his editorial, biology before anatomy. So it is really important to know the biology of the disease, and that is really dependent on the age of the patient because of the menopausal changes and the changes in the biology of the patient's disease and the patient's physiology.
All right. So do you expect, Manjiri, again to you only, do you expect that in the future, CAN-assist breast will become a mandatory companion diagnostic for some decision-making process for breast cancer? Like we have ALK mutation, we have to do that before we start the treatment of the patient.
Correct. So that is really where the big goal of OncoStem, that is really what big goal of OncoStem is. So to one of the questions, this is a protein based versus the others are gene based. That is really but the important aspect is both whether the test is genomics or proteomics based. We are trying to understand the biology of the disease. We have seen this in time and again that two people with the same, leaving everything else the same, with the same tumor size, some patient recur and the other patient, one patient may recur and the other one will not. And that is because the biology in these two is different. And that's what underlying test is trying to assess. And we do it based on proteomics platform. And that's why we use 5 markers. And the bigger goal here is to come up with targeted drugs. Now, none of the genomics based tests can actually be companion diagnostics for any new drugs to come. But because our 5 biomarkers are proteomic based and some of them are also membrane associated, we are in the process to find pharma partners to really start looking at the drug development aspects, because now we have substantial validation in humans. I mean, we never had anything in mice, but so we have substantial clinical validation data to support that these biomarkers are indeed able to segregate patients into low and high risk very well, and hence can be used in the clinical trials as well as in the drug discovery further. And if that happens, surely, just like HER2/neu marker was always a prognostic marker and then it became a predictive marker, and HER2/neu is a companion diagnostic, HER2/neu testing before Herceptin can be given. So similarly, we hope our test becomes a companion diagnostics for new targeted drugs to come.
All right, excellent. I'm sure that Dr. G.S. Bhattacharya also has some thoughts on what is the future of using tests like CAN-assist breast as a companion diagnostic, as well as whether there is only the age which is correlating, or is postmenopausal also an independent factor to be decided among patients' risk. So over to GS, please.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Purvesh, actually, I'm going to take a step back, go back to Oncotype DX.
Okay.
And then show you tell people that it was a cutoff of 50 years, above 50 and below 50 initially.
Yes.
And then the menopausal factor was brought in later.
Correct.
And then they realized that even if you were above 50, but you were premenopausal, your outcome was poor. Right? So it's not necessarily that menopause is a function of age. It's a variable age where it is suddenly like it happens tomorrow morning. So there is a continuum taking place. So we have to keep in mind the menopausal status of the patient when we take a choice. There is a choice of the menopausal woman. We also have to keep in mind that age cutoffs will depend upon a lot of other factors. It's just not that, because we by now know, Dr. Saparna has brought it out, that it's the menopausal status that is more important than the age cutoff, because we've been able to show that possibly the ovarian suppression has a role to play. Not very clear, but it is there that in the data, it's that which may be accounting for it. The second part is that Purvesh, Can Assist is based on 5 markers. These 5 markers are basically, of which 2 of these markers basically are on these, I would say, drug resistance marker, rather drug exclusion markers in this cell. We don't have this as a companion diagnostic test, but I'm certain it will come up. At least the E-candidate will come up as a companion diagnostic. So can still sometime become for it as a companion diagnostic test. But I think since it actually does not look at ER/PR, but is looking at the I would say cancerness of a cancer cell, or malignantness of a malignant cell. In that case, what will happen is this is going to move forward. It's going to be used in other malignancies, because all epithelial malignancies would show these features of high risk and low risk based upon that. I think Manjari will agree with me. And I think they will be looking at other epithelial malignancies where people will take the lead forward and saying that when you have malignancy, you need to choose chemotherapy. Let's do Can Assist first.
Excellent, thank you. Now this slide actually shows that the number of doctors who would select Can Assist breast is increased when the patient is less than 50 years of age. So I think, Manjari, there should be good news for your company that people have actually realized the true value is in the younger patients, which is the majority of the case for Indians in any case. So that is an excellent opportunity for you. And can I have the next slide, please? So Manjari, can you explain this about high-risk patients? There was some data from on Can Assist breast on chemotherapy benefit for high-risk patients as compared to Oncotype DX. So I'd like you to go through these 2 slides and explain exactly what is happening.
Yeah, so this slide really demonstrates the usefulness of Can Assist breast in showing that only the patients who are high risk actually benefit from chemotherapy. So what you see, the Kaplan-Meier survival graph is on the left is all the patients stratified by Can Assist breast as low risk. And then we assessed how were they treated, whether they were treated with or without chemotherapy. So the blue line is with chemotherapy and the red line is just the endocrine therapy. So if you see that all the patients stratified as low risk by Can Assist breast, whether or not they were treated with chemotherapy, it did not make a difference. All of them had a really good survival DMFS of about 95%. But now if you move your attention to the Kaplan-Meier graph on the right-hand side, these are all the patients stratified as high risk by Can Assist breast, but they were treated differently. They were treated with or without chemotherapy. Once again, just like the graph on the left. And here, if you, as you can see, the red line, which is just the endocrine therapy. So if the patient is stratified as high risk and patient gets only endocrine therapy, they have a higher chance of recurrence. They have a lower DMFS of 80%. Whereas patients who were classified as high risk for recurrence and were given chemotherapy on top of endocrine therapy, the DMFS of the blue line in the KM curve on the right is 92%. It has gone up, and this shows that the patients who are high risk, only they get benefited out of chemotherapy when you treat them with chemotherapy. So this difference between these 2 lines is what we call chemotherapy benefit. And Can Assist breast is able to showcase this chemotherapy benefit in high risk patients, which is also shown by genomic by Oncotype DX. Yeah.
Excellent. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what you are referring to, right?
Correct. Yeah. So even in case of Oncotype DX, as you can see, the graph on the left shows that all the patients treated, all the patients stratified as low risk by Oncotype DX do not benefit from added chemotherapy to tamoxifen, Whereas the graph on the right shows that patients stratified as high risk do benefit from added chemotherapy to the regime of tamoxifen, indicating the test is able to showcase that only the high risk patients benefit from chemotherapy and not the low risk patients.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So next slide. One more. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Okay. So this is the last slide, and you see that the majority of the people are actually interested in analysis of the survey and what we bring out as a manuscript from the discussions that we have had. So we hope that we have a consensus guideline that can be useful in the background of our Indian patients. And I would recommend that anybody in the audience who's interested should get back to me so that we can include you in the discussion. Amish has a question to Manjari. So whenever Kashish is ready, he can unmute Amish so that he can ask the question.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Manjari, very nice Kaplan-Meier curves. My question is the slide which you showed before Parikh sir went on to further slide. Kaplan-Meier survival curve for high risk on CAN-ASSIST score. 92% patients, long-term survivors on chemoendocrine therapy. In high risk group, have you sub-classified into very, very high risk score versus high risk score? Especially the 8% of patients who, in spite of chemoendocrine therapy, still relapsed. Was there a difference in the score? Some say somebody has 50 versus somebody has 25.
So Manjari, this is the slide I think that Amish is referring
yes, correct,
to.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
please go ahead and answer his question. Can we unmute Manjari, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I was saying, Doctor, it's a very good question, Dr. Amish, and very valid point. We haven't really, I don't remember the top of my head what was the, whether there was any difference in the risk scores of these patients, the patients who, 8% who recurred, whether they were really at the far end of the spectrum or they were intermediate. I really don't know, frankly. So I will definitely look into it and get back to you if we find anything really interesting on that. And that would be actually a good way to also look into biology more. Or actually, maybe they have additional mutations. Maybe they have gene duplications. They have, other mutations like BRCA, etc., which we don't know. And it could be a good way to even assess that information out of those patients to really understand why are these patients recurring despite the chemotherapy.
Great. So now we have almost finished our time, and I'm going to ask each of the experts to give their take-home message. So we will start with Dr. Amit Verma first. Can you, in just 1 or 2 minutes, please give a take-home message to our audience and participants for management molecular testing in early breast cancer patients? Amit, please.
Thank you, Dr. Parikh. So the take-home message from the whole discussion is the biological aspect of the tumor has to be taken into account for early breast cancer before taking any decision, whether it is through your ER, PR, HER2, or Ki67, or your prognostic assays, whether it is Oncotype DX or CAN-ASSIST or MammaPrint, ProSigna, EndoPredict. All the things have to be taken into account. And importantly, Dr. Parikh's recommendation that the patient wishes has to also to be taken into account before taking any decision to give chemotherapy or endocrine therapy or both. So this is the take home. Regarding the choice of assays, there will be subtle differences among different assays. Depending upon the patient confidence, their affordability, you can make a choice. But whatever you choose, please choose with confidence and go with it. So your lack of confidence is reflected with the patient, which causes a lot of harm rather than the testing itself. That is my personal opinion. Third is that we have to use more and more. Affordability is a very important factor. And for that, I personally recommend that CAN-ASSIST can be an easy way out for most of our patients. We strongly believe with the data because the data has been validated at clinical level, and the clinical utility has been done in a perspective way with a median of more than 5 years average of follow-up. This gives a lot of confidence for to use Can Assist, and patients who still wants to get opinion from the West. In that case, Oncotype DX sometimes is a better off, but Can Assist for the inpatient is a very good go for all of our patients. With that, I conclude my you can say remarks, and over to Dr. Padi.
Thank you very much, Amit. Now we go to Anil for his insights and take-home messages. Anil Hirur, please.
Yes, can I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think as we go ahead, biology will play more and more a bigger role in the choice of treatments. Patients do like to have a certain kind of validation of clinical decisions now, especially when it comes to chemotherapy. So we are going to use more and more of validation tests. We will need Indian data, and I think Can Assist is doing a good job there. And I feel that cost does play a very, very big role as far as our patients are concerned. And if there are tests which are clinically validated and reduce the cost, I think the use is going to be more and more. I think that would be my take on the entire thing.
Excellent. I think Dr. Govind Babu has some question or comment. So we will take his comment first and then move on to GS Bhattacharya for his take-home message. Govind Babu, please, can we unmute him?
Yeah, Purvish, like you were mentioning, all the data, all the prognostic factors that we get, ultimately we need to look into what the patient wants. So this is a new, not very new branch of medicine that is now termed as participatory medicine. So I think that is very important.
Perfect.
And the important thing about Can Assist, I think this is the first thing that is so much data on Indian patients. So I think that is important for us to keep in mind. So that's what I had to say.
Great, yeah. I think that's a wonderful message. And now we move on to Dr. GS Bhattacharya for his take-home message for the participants. GS, please.
Purvish, we are in the era of precision medicine. And being in the era of precision medicine, we will have to keep in mind a few things. One, the patient's preferences are going to be high. We have to make sure we have a precision of data that's with us. We also have the method of data analysis and application of the data. We have a test which is actually looking at certain features of epithelial tumors and the tendency to become more malignant, which can act as a cutoff. For each individual of the 5 protein markers they look at, each of them is a validated marker on its own right. This has made it a more valid situation.
Excellent.
We need to carry this forward, just not in breast cancer, but in all forms of breast cancer. As I said, we have to be an efficiency. Effectivity is important because that's where the cost comes in and how it performs with your previous test. We need to keep ourselves updated. We should look forward to it. And thanks a lot to Kavina for having me here.
Great. Thank you, GS. And now finally back to Manjari to give a vote of thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I really admire everybody's time and really appreciate everybody's time and effort to come on to this webinar at 6 o'clock in the evening and stay on and ask interesting questions. Thank you so much, all the participants, and thank you so much for all the panelists, Dr. Hirur, Dr. GS, Dr. Purvish, and Dr. Verma. And a big thank you to Kashish also for the wonderful organization without a, absolutely seamless, no faults, nothing. It was really wonderful to have you all. And thanks again for your time and effort, and really enjoy your rest of the evening now.
Thank you very much.